Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Quantum Listener. I'm David Ellis. Rainy day out today. If you've seen all the episodes up to now, you will know that this is obviously a channel that is devoted pretty much exclusively to music. But I thought we'd change the subject slightly today. One of the things I am, in addition to conductor and a cellist and overall musician, is as a personal trainer. I thought I'd talk a little bit about it for a variety of reasons, and just reflect a little bit on my journey in that regard. I originally was not ever a big exerciser. Growing up, I was very into baseball, but that was certainly much more from a spectator perspective, remembering that I'm from Cleveland and that it was the 90s when the Indians were really, really, really good. So therefore, I played baseball, but that was really because I watched a lot of baseball. I did sports because it was required in school. I never really did anything too intense, especially with regards to, say, football, which I did in middle school, but certainly didn't do in high school. I guess tennis, but also from a recreational perspective. I wasn't really about to be a professional athlete. Then I went to school, by which I mean college, and I really started pursuing music full time. Almost entirely the time that one is in college for music is spent devoted to practicing or studying the parts themselves. There's very little time for recreation. And I, during my undergrad, considered exercise to be rather recreational. Weight would fluctuate as the school year went on, and then I would go off for summer. I'd end up exercising in some form or another, and I'd be back in shape just in time for fall and then gained another 20 pounds. Eventually I hit my master's, which was very stressful, and with stress comes eating. Eventually I ballooned up to about 230 pounds or so, mostly fat, certainly not strength. Eventually I graduate, go out into the real world, and habits don't necessarily get better, especially in a musician's career, which is extremely turbulent and is filled with ups and downs according to what hirings you get, what hirings you don't get. But certainly I was out of shape, I didn't have very good cardio, and I was definitely headed down a road that I did not want to go. Although I will admit that I didn't necessarily know that at the time. Eventually my parents are like, we're going to change that. They got me a personal training package. And one of the things you should probably know about my undergrad and grad school both were that because I was playing so much, especially volunteering for a lot of projects and such, is that my hands were having trouble keeping up to a degree. Very common thing with collegiate musicians especially is that they will tend to get sort of tendinitis somewhere in the wrist around this area. Never had full-fledged tendinitis, but I certainly was starting to have what I thought were probably going to be symptoms of down the line if I wasn't careful. So when I started working out, initially I was very, very hesitant of doing any resistance training. I didn't want it to get worse. While I thought it would be very cool to get strong, it was not necessarily as much of a priority as much as it was to lose weight. And then I lifted, and it felt great. Great enough that I eventually thought that that would be more of a priority maybe than the music. That's definitely an oversimplification. But I definitely knew that in order to have a more content life, that I needed to be healthier. And therefore I was willing to go through whatever I needed to do in order to get healthier. And I enjoyed lifting, and therefore I continued to lift. And what miraculously happened, actually, was that my wrists got better, which I thought was rather counterintuitive. And this really got me on the road to personal training more from a knowledge gain perspective, that I wanted to know why it was that my wrists were starting to feel better. I've almost always had a very tight right shoulder just because that's my bow arm and that tends to always get a little bit tight. And I wasn't at all surprised to see that it was starting to finally relax and finally strengthen in ways that helped with the playing. But it was especially the wrist that I wanted to know. I had a lot of friends in undergrad that were going through their variety of hand things. I thought as a musician it would be very good to know exactly what was going on and why it felt like it was improving with the lifting. So I talked to my trainer at that time, asked her where should I go. She suggested the National Personal Training Institute, and I started taking the courses, as well as watching a whole plethora of YouTube resources and reading a whole variety of articles about weight training and how it benefits in a variety of ways, especially at higher intensities. Now what's interesting is that the week before MPTI, I actually had a bit of a medical emergency. I ended up having an appendectomy. And just the process of going through that surgery, it wasn't necessarily the surgery itself, it was just being in the hospital. Me realized that I definitely did not want to be in that kind of situation again for something that I knew that I could have prevented. It was at this point that I realized that I needed to take it even more seriously than I already had. So I kicked it up an extra gear. Took the classes, got the certification, and around this time got very much addicted to powerlifting. My workouts I had been doing mostly at the time were predominantly machine related or circuit training related. I was really working on basic conditioning, basic strength, trying to get the muscles to finally activate that hadn't been activating for so long. Now powerlifting, for those who don't know, is your basic 3 lifts, which are the squat, the bench, and the deadlift. Those are 3 lifts where if you have something going on with your form, it's going to reveal a certain muscular weakness or muscular imbalance that you should be aware of. Do I think there are other sports that can address this? Absolutely. But I enjoyed doing powerlifting to the point that I thought that why not pursue it this way, at least for me personally. And especially as one in Cleveland, one of the things that I realized that as I was doing these lifts more and more often was because there's so much endorphin release that comes with these lifts. I found the lifting to be very helpful as the Cleveland winters progress. One of the things that took me a long time with the conducting was trying not to get my feet to move around a lot. They definitely still do. After playing an instrument for so long where you're just sitting and you're not using your feet, you're not necessarily going to be as aware of what your feet are doing as, say, when you're standing, and all of a sudden you're actually moving your body according to where you're standing. There are two very good ways of learning how to show yourself with strength and solidity when you're conducting. So, for instance, to show some sort of a forte dynamic. Those are the squat and the deadlift. Again, these are not the only ways, they just happen to work for me. But the change, even after I initially started getting into deadlifting and squatting seriously, between what my orchestra sounded like with certain motions and then when I simply stood up and gave a very simple downbeat, the depth of sound completely changed based on where my shoulders were, because I had to be aware of where my shoulders were during the deadlift, or really any of the lifts. Of course, being aware of how planted your feet are. I'm about to do a 300-pound deadlift while tap dancing. And overall, the confidence that just comes from being able to lift those sort of heavy weights and the feeling that your body is capable of moving or standing with strength in whatever ways does translate to whatever ensemble you're leading. And I would say also translates to whatever audience you are entertaining. So it's not just conductors. It's all instrumentalists, it's all singers. So that's a really succinct and very brief description of how fitness has kind of changed my life in terms of as a musician, and especially as a classical musician. I'll finish this video with the advice that I give pretty much every client, which is make sure that you do an exercise that you like to do. I experimented with yoga before, I experimented with cross-train before, running, but nothing got me as excited to go to the gym as powerlifting and the weightlifting that comes along with powerlifting. Anyways, hope you enjoyed. I'll see you next week.